Good evening, everybody. It is Thursday, June 5, 2025. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Facilities Committee. Sorry, we're starting a few minutes late. We were in executive session. And we'll begin with a roll call. To my left, please.
Tracy Osecki, School Board. Jessica Binda, Supervisor of Facilities.
Tony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Santos, Superintendent.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
David Schrader, I'm an architect.
Joe Taylor.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Colcon School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Pettapati School Board.
Thanks, everyone. Mr. Rapp, when you're ready, would you start us off?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Case. I'd like to start off tonight's meeting with an announcement regarding a summer program administered by the state called Sunbucks. This program provides money during the summer for students who qualify for free and reduced meals in our schools. The program is administered by the state, so we don't provide any of the funding, but they provide up to, I believe, $120 for the summer for students to spend on food during the summer. We will be putting out an information sheet this week and on the website as well. There's a QR code on there that you can scan on, or a website that you can go to see if you're eligible. Some students who are eligible, automatically eligible, will be contacted directly. Other students will need to verify their participation in the program. So just want to make sure that word gets out that is available to students who qualify for free and reduced meals in the schools.
That's good news. Thank you.
Now I'd like to turn it over to Jess Binda.
Thank you. A reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check or additional details on a matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at crsd.org. Okay. Tonight we have two agenda items. One is the Churchville Elementary School backflow preventer replacement, and then we will continue our conversations with the master plan study. So item number one is the Churchville Elementary School backflow preventer replacement, bid 2533. We received 5 bids on Thursday, May 29th. The scope of work includes replacement of the domestic water backflow preventer and sump pump. The recommended award would be to Hirschberg Mechanical at $43,400. And if you guys take a look at the pictures above, the picture on the left shows the location. The mesh area is where the sump pump is located. It's in a pit in the boiler room. The picture in the middle right here shows the actual location of the sump pump. And to give you some kind of, like a little bit of a reference, I'm actually laying on my stomach taking a picture of this sump pump. And then the picture on the right, you can see it's full of, taking a picture of the backflow preventer. And you can see the water building up because the sump pump's no longer working. Go back. So again, recommended award is to Hirschberg Mechanical for $43,400.
Question? Are there any concerns? Otherwise, it'll go on consent agenda.
Okay. Now to the master plan study. First item, we have a gentleman came in, I believe, 2 months ago to speak regarding his idea about infill of the courtyard. I've kind of nicknamed it a Performing Arts Center so that we just don't name it courtyard infill. It's not as nice. So the idea was that we would fill in the courtyard. As you can see right here, there's that blue box. And the need is, so I discussed the need with the principal. The need is for music-related groups like color guard and drumline. Because right now, anytime they have rehearsals or practices, they get pushed out of the gym for sports, and then they get pushed into the cafeteria, and they get pushed out of the cafeteria for like other meetings and events like that. So they kind of get shuffled throughout the area. And so there is a need. I know when we spoke last time, we wanted to kind of get some information from the principal, from the school. And there definitely is a need to have a location where they can practice. So if you guys look kind of where the section through the building, this purple roof right here is the auditorium. The area will kind of match up between the walls of the auditorium and continue on. You could also use it as a practice area for plays and, items like that. Make sure there's a connection between there and the auditorium. Some of the considerations for the build would be existing HVAC equipment. Is the chiller sized enough to take in that additional space along with the boilers? And then the existing electric, do we have enough power in the building to serve this area? Some of the other ideas were to include a lesser sound and light system within the space, so that the plays and musicals and like band performances could also practice in that area and utilize those spaces with light and sound.
Yes.
Would the corridors be losing light? Or are they just solid walls right now?
No, there's definitely windows to the outside, so they would be losing light. So we'd have to potentially have to make some modification with lighting in the hallways to make sure there's adequate lighting.
But at least it's not classrooms.
No, so yeah, the classrooms, as you can see here, the classrooms are on the outside and then you have a corridor on the inside. So the classrooms still have that exterior wall with the windows.
Okay.
Teresa.
So I have two questions. When you say considerations for build and the HVAC and electric, it's unknown now at this moment whether or not the existing HVAC and the existing electric could support it, or?
So it is currently unknown. We haven't taken steps to investigate further because we wanted to kind of have a conversation about, do we, as a board, do you want us to investigate further, further possibilities?
Okay. And so then my second question is, it sounds like you have confirmed that this is a true need that South has. Does North have the same need?
I would assume so, but I think North is in a different position because we really haven't thoroughly discussed what we're going to do with North, whether we do renovation or replacement. Where South, we obviously would do that. That's a given that we would do renovation there.
Mr. Higg.
You're saying that we don't have any room on that property for the color guard and drumline to practice?
Not inside. They get shifted.
Why does it have to be inside?
Because a lot of their practices happen in the wintertime, during winter sports season. So they get shifted out of the gym a lot for wrestling, boys and girls basketball.
So if we do this courtyard infill, then we're gonna have to put up some kind of structure on the outside to prevent the elements then from getting in, I would assume.
Oh, without a doubt. This is, what we were talking about was basically a building inside our building.
Yeah, and I guess to Tracy's point, because if South gets one, I'm sure you're gonna hear the very next day, okay, where's ours?
And
So-
then that is a possibility that we could talk about incorporating that into the renovation or the new building, whatever we decide to do. This was just the one idea that was brought to the table, I think, 2 months ago?
Mr. Roosevelt. Thank you. Has the
administration of the building and of Council Rock evaluated if there's any other use for this space? A. B, do they actually need that amount to extend for the full courtyard to go to the end?
No, we would have to do well, I'll take question 2 first. We would have to do an investigation about how much room they need. And this is just preliminary. I just put a box up there just to show the space.
Okay.
This does not show any kind of square footage, anything like that. So we would have to investigate that. And then the administration, they're constantly the building administration is constantly working with them to kind of shift them around the building and give them practice locations, and just make sure that they have some time.
Yep.
But it's a struggle in the building.
Are there any other uses that the building could use for the space?
Well, you could I would caution putting some kind of sports in there. But I'm sure you can use it for a lot more stuff.
Okay. And then the last question, last time we discussed this, I requested that we do some sort of an egress study, particularly since this is the auditorium, which is an assembly space, which requires more egress accommodations than other spaces. This quite likely could be blocking off at least one egress.
It absolutely does.
Right.
So there's a lot more work that we would have to do for this, but this was just step 1 of many to, kind of bring to the table that there is a need. Or the school believes that there is a need.
Question, please. I can see that on either side of that space are corridors. Would those corridors currently have windows to the outside?
Yes,
So they would provide daylight to the corridors.
yes,
So we would be taking away daylight from those corridors by
Yes.
building that roof.
yes.
Thank you. Yes, Tracy.
Has there been any discussion, or would this not be feasible for them to use, for the color guard to use the gym at another school, say one of the middle schools or one of the elementary schools? Is that not copacetic?
I don't know.
Maybe
that
it's a question for Dr. Senko. Like, is it inappropriate to have high schoolers practicing?
No, we've had that. In fact, when I was the building principal at Holland Elementary, we stored a mat that the color guard would put down on the floor. It was labor intensive for the color guard to come and lay that mat out and then pick it back up and roll it up when they were done. Some of the challenges that they have, it's the height of the ceiling because they're twirling and tossing in the flags. So that's some of the challenges that they experience outside of the, full size or full height of the gym.
Ms. Powell.
So if this is gonna be used for music, doesn't it need a special insulation for like sound?
Or we would definitely have to put some kind of sound insulation barriers, panels, something in it. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's pretty intense construction. It's not like just covering,
We're not putting a tent up. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, we're doing the master plan now and this just pop up. Like, it's not even part of the master plan, right? It was not an identified need in the process.
I think this was brought to our attention and there seemed to be enough interest from the board originally to look into it. We're bringing it now as a consideration as to whether or not the board has the appetite to add this to the master plan. And how, obviously, this is something that's going to require work to look into. What is the appetite for the board to look into this? Do you want us to spend time finding out the answers to those questions? Or is this, in light of other needs, is this not a top,
Yeah.
How interested is the board in this?
Yeah. Joe.
I would say we're already down the road with a lot of other things, and this is actually one idea, but it opens up a big can of worms with other things like the pool, or something like a pool. Not saying no, it's a good idea, but, and so we're being presented it today. I don't think we're gonna make any decision right now. So it's good that you bring it to our attention and we can add it in there, but I don't think anybody's gonna tell you, go do a feasibility study and cost analysis after tonight's presentation.
All right, well, I'm getting a sense that we're gonna table it for now, put it on the shelf, however you want to phrase it, unless anybody objects. I think it's an interesting concept, but we'll keep that on the shelf, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. So next item, we're gonna move on to Chancellor Center. If you guys received your handout here, these are the costs that we're gonna be reviewing. I'll quickly go over some of the stuff that Doug was able to talk about last month. The first item on here is the Chancellor full renovation. Just to recap that again, the scope of work includes HVAC replacement, repair water infiltration, foundation issues, emergency generator, medium level renovations, exterior stone repointing, exterior painting, parking lot maintenance. It excludes reconfiguration of major walls, vertical circulation. The total project range was between 18.1 million to 18.4 million. The second page was just the improvement plan renovations. So these are the items that are in our book. So the scope of work includes all items from the 2025 capital improvement plan, HVAC replacement, repair water infiltration, foundation issues, emergency generator, exterior stone reporting, exterior painting, parking lot maintenance. It excludes reconfiguration of major walls or vertical circulation, excludes work necessary for the full renovation or address programming issues. And the range, total project range was 9.7 million to 9.9 million. Then the third page, which is the new item that you guys asked for, is for the warm, safe, and dry. I'll just go over the brief scope of work and then hand it over to Doug to talk about that. We've got the HVAC replacement, repair water infiltration, foundation issues, emergency generator. It excludes exterior stone pointing, excludes exterior painting, excludes parking lot maintenance, excludes reconfiguration of major walls or vertical circulation, and excludes work necessary for full renovation or address programming needs. That total budget is 8.5 million to almost 8.7 million. So Doug, I'll hand it over to you. Go ahead.
Before we hand it over, I just wanted to make a comment. Last month, when we talked about the Chancellor Center, the subject of Act 34 of 1973 came up and what we were allowed to spend on an administrative building. So Act 34 would not apply to simply renovating this building. Act 34 comes into play for new construction or for renovations that include an expansion of the building by 20% or more. So since we're not expanding the building, this Act 34 would not apply. And we would be allowed to do these renovations without going to hearings or.
Thank you.
So Doug, if you want to talk about your estimate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a good job explaining them. I'm happy to answer questions. I know the warm, safe, and dry was not included last time. I apologize. So we got that to you, and now you have, I think, most of the options for Chancellor.
Question? Mr. Bauer?
Just going off your last comment, Mr. Rapp, did the fact that the building is historical have any weight, anything?
As far as any Pennsylvania law, no. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the only factor that the age of the building has is that some construction costs might be more than on a newer building.
But are we under some regulation as a historic building?
No.
Not like how some are, I think how some are?
No, this is not really, I mean, this building is in a historic district. It's not necessarily a historic
It
building.
hasn't been like categorized or protected or anything?
So when we did the windows, we did just talk to them, make sure that everything was copacetic and there was very little,
The local organization?
just a local
Yeah,
organization.
we cooperate with the local organization.
Oh,
We don't, and I'm not making a value judgment, just that those are the, that it is an older building, so we have to do more specially designed HVAC system, and I'm not mistaken in any of that.
No, I think, the additions that were done here in the early 2000s are apparent that they were not historic in any way,
Yeah.
so.
so it's not protected, okay, thank you.
But the budgets, are, as Jess said, the first one that she reviewed is the total renovations plus the exterior elements that are in the book itself. The second budget is all the items that are in the capital plan book, and then the third is just the warm, safe, and dry from the capital plan book. It excludes some of those that aren't necessarily warm, safe, and dry related.
Just a quick question, since you brought up Act 34, and you mentioned it in reference to something else when we were talking about options, I'll say. Two other options that were presented in reference to Chancellor, or not Chancellor, I'll say, is redoing Richboro Middle and/or buying another piece of property. Are there any Act 4 restrictions with either one of those options?
I believe the answer is, I'm not a.
Yeah, we can address that.
Thank you.
The renovation version does not require Act 34, because again, you're renovating an existing facility that you own. Building a standalone facility on a new piece of property or on any piece of property is almost undoable administrative buildings, because Act 34 does not allow you enough FTEs to actually get the building built. And that's how PDE, Department of Education, categorizes Act 34. You can get enough FTEs if you add to a middle school or a high school. Those will allow you to build a new facility, but it has to be physically connected.
Okay. Yeah, no,
I believe Mr. Hickman.
my question was, one was buying another property in Newtown that's already existing, so you answered that question.
Yeah.
But as it relates to Richboro Middle School would probably be, I wouldn't call that, in my opinion, it wouldn't be a renovation, it would be a tear down and build up on the same site for an administration building.
Well, then that would not work. The version that we were working on was renovating and bringing the old Richboro up to speed, so it could be an administrative structure.
Okay,
And that's okay.
but that would work.
That does work.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other part of the
We can get
question
enough people
is
to justify it.
purchasing property that already has a building on it would not be under Act 34.
That's correct, because again, you're renovating a structure. Yep,
Or even if you didn't need to renovate it.
even if you didn't, that's correct.
I'm not saying that that's possible.
So,
Pardon me.
No, perfect.
The three options, I guess my question, or what I see missing here is interior painting. I assume that we're not gonna move everybody out and not paint the walls while everybody's out of their offices, right? Do all three of these include that?
No.
No, interior painting is not included.
You're just looking at warm, safe, and dry. It's just the item.
What about the medium?
Medium,
Medium include interior painting?
we had some plaster repairs and some repainting, but not entire building repainting.
The painting is included, if you look at the first page, that medium renovation, $100 a square foot for the DC and $150 a square foot for the MEP. That's where interior painting would be captured.
Okay, but it's not gonna cost
It's not.
$9 million.
No. What I'm saying though is that 8.795 million,
Includes it. So
Includes
it's, interior painting is included in option 1, but not 2 or 3.
correct, because that's not,
Flooring is included, like refinishing the flooring is included in option 2, but not in option 3,
select refinishing,
where it needs it.
yes.
Alright.
So, yeah, very select locations.
Okay.
Oh, that's all I'll say.
Whereas total renovation will touch all the finishes.
Yeah, Ms. Polly?
So I just want to clarify, we cannot buy a property, I'm just trying to figure out our options. We cannot buy a property in Newtown and move our offices there. That is not allowed, is that what,
We can buy
We can.
an existing building.
okay,
Move our offices there. We can't buy land and build a building.
okay, but we can buy a building and move there if
Yes.
we want to. Okay. All right, so, my other question is, I know we have applied for grants that we will find out in October.
Yes.
And I know there is a time, like a year, that we have to spend the grants if we get them. What can we do to prepare so we are ready to get the grants to move forward with this project?
I think you would need to decide, I don't know where you fall, but you would decide whether or not you want to do the project and begin doing work to plan the project and get the necessary permits so that when the money became available, the project could begin. If you're talking about expediting it so that the
Right.
project begins soon after we find out we actually get the funding. As far as, the limitation of a year, one part that I want to lay the board's fears to rest is that although we have a time frame to spend the money on, we were told, and I don't have this in writing, but we were told that extensions can be granted to hold the money while construction existed past a year. So that is a possibility or a probability should construction need to extend beyond 1 year from the date that we receive the grant.
Tony, when we met with the people for the grant, if we're told we're awarded in October, when were they gonna, when was the money gonna be available for spend?
Most likely May or June.
So you would have from May or June 2026 through May or June 2027 to spend that money. And then with previous grants, we've been able to extend as long as we were showing progress with the project. And when we did the ACE grant, we had to extend it for Richborough, but we were able to show progress and we were able to extend it.
Yeah, but what is the process to start? Because, okay, you're gonna spend maybe May, right, 2026, but to get to the point that you are ready to spend the money, I mean, what do you have to? You have to send out for RFPs, right? You have to get permits. I mean, what is this process and how long it is and how much money does it?
So if you guys remember last month, we, if anybody needs it, I printed a couple I printed more than a couple copies, I can pass them around.
Sure.
Step one is approval from at least 5 board members to say move forward in one direction with Chancellor. So then we would go out to RFP for both project management or construction management and design firms. Select those, have you guys approve what the selection is, and then we would start design. Design, because we would need what's the letters, Doug, what's the letters, the MPDS? I know I'm missing.
Oh, you're gonna ask me that again.
So we would need permitting from the county for water,
Yeah.
whatever the letters are.
Yeah.
So we would need approximately a year for design and permitting to overlap together. And at that point, we would then be ready to bid. We would bid out the projects, just like we always do with the multi-prime bids, bring it to the board for approval, and then construction. So you're talking about approximately a year and 3 months till we can put a shovel in the ground.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
So, In this, so design is about 12 months, right?
Yes.
To do the design, do you have to do RFPs first? Because we have to figure out who's gonna do the design, right?
Well, legally, we could do different options. We could simply, because it's a professional service, we could assign someone to do it.
Okay.
But I think in the past, we have done RFPs. So there's two options there. So does that,
And if we decide to do the RFP, how long does it take?
so you would, I put the RFP together. So give me a couple weeks to do that.
Okay.
And then we'd have to put the RFP out, so you'd be about a month for the responses, evaluate the responses, do interviews, and then bring the recommendation to the board for approval. So you're talking about 2 months there.
So we could do that until we find out in October if we get the grants or not. So if we get them, it would be an easy decision to just move into the design. If we don't, we still have to decide if we want to move forward or not, right?
Yeah, so you could write the RFP with the information that the possibility of the grant in there. And then you start your preliminary design process, assuming that you're gonna get the grant. If you don't get, say, you don't get the grant and you want to eliminate a certain portion of the project, then you could modify the design. I don't think that, David, you think you'd be too far along in the design to kind of pivot? And I mean, we could put all that information in the RFP, that there's a possibility of a pivot in October, once we found out if we did or did not get the grant.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just wondering, the grant money, what was the maximum or what's the range that could potentially be awarded?
We've asked for grant money for both the HVAC and for the water infiltration in the building. We asked for a total of $7 million, $3.5 million for each project. The thinking there was, in working with the Congressman's office, was that if that's a high amount for this grant. And there is always a possibility that if we only get one, we could go back to the other, but that if they wanted to only do one, that we got enough funding for one of those two projects. And with the possibility that we could go back and ask for it again next year. I also want to add with the grant, just in the interest of full disclosure, that this is not a district grant. This would be a Borough of Newtown grant, and they have graciously decided to sponsor the grant and administer the payments to the contractors for us, should we receive the grant. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that they are the actual applicants for this grant. And those are the rules of the grant necessitate that, not just because we're not really allowed to apply for this grant. But the borough is.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is simple, and the other based on what Mrs. Pally was talking about. Would somebody refresh my memory? What's the ballpark figure we were talking about for renovating Richboro Middle School? I think, I won't even, there's no point in me. But my second question has to do with, if we went to RFP for the design work on the renovation, would we need to make a decision on which option we're moving forward with in order to go to the RFP?
So I'll answer your first question first. $21,125,000 for the renovation of Richboro Middle School.
That's exactly what I thought. 21 million, okay.
And
But,
then your second
yeah,
did you want to talk about that one?
no,
Okay.
21 million to renovate Richboro Middle.
Yes. And your second question, we could write in the RFP, we have full disclosure in there that we have the possibility of being awarded a grant, and that will determine the final scope of work. Obviously, in all of these options, we have HVAC replacement and foundation. think that's the core of the of the renovation, so we can definitely start with that portion and then add the just say we want to go with full renovation, add the full renovation on come October, whatever the date is. We can absolutely do that, and what we would do is ask for two prices. We would ask for the base price of warm, safe, and dry, or, what's the second one called again?
It's a CIP, it's a CIP.
Yeah, CIP, thank you. So you could do, just say you guys wanted to do as the base CIP, then I would have base CIP and then how much is the add for doing full renovation.
So we could get this process in motion tonight and our next board meeting without committing to spending any dollars. It would simply be the RFP process.
Yes,
Okay,
just the decision needs to be made is what is my base? And then is the full renovation the option, the second option, my alternate one?
so, okay, we would be committing to obviously the base, the
Yes.
warm, safe, and dry. And then we have to make a decision, do we go with CIP, the medium one, as Ms. Oseki smartly put it, or the full renovation?
Small, medium, and large.
So you could make your base the medium
Oh,
and the option
Yeah.
one the large.
that's
Yes,
a good point.
yes.
Or you can make option, or make your base the large.
However, you do the alternates, you could, like, that's not a problem. As long as the architect knows, the team knows that they could be documenting that entire renovation, then they can provide a fee.
Yep.
Yeah,
Doing that, so.
Sorry. So I obviously like that idea. I do have some questions. I guess I would like to understand better what would be the easiest to do. Well, everybody is out of the building, and I would like to make sure that whatever our base is, whether it's the medium or the low, includes that. I think it's dumb to have everybody move out and not refinish the floors, and then, in 4 years, everybody has to move out so we can refinish the floors. I think same thing with painting. Different than fencing upgrades. Fencing upgrades, first of all, I don't know that we need a fence, but if we were gonna put in a fence, we could do that anytime as a summer project or something like that. So I would like to better understand electrical is another example, like, if we're gonna change the lighting, easier to do that while everybody's out, I would wanna make sure that that's included in whatever our bottom model is.
I think there's a hybrid. I think there's probably some budget, that isn't one of the three that you've seen, right? Because we haven't had programming meetings, we haven't talked about it. We're trying to give you kind of levels of what the cost may be, but I don't disagree with you in any way. I agree, if you're emptying the building, you should try to take care of some of those, things. Like paint all the walls while the building's empty, try to take care of the floors. But being mindful of your budget, right? Because I know that you also have a budget that you want to maintain. So we can sit down with the admin team and Jess, and we can talk about, what that scope wants to be. And there can be some alternate bid items in there so that those decisions can be made later. If you're worried that it may exceed, maybe you guys agree that 12 million is the number. I'm not just throwing it out there. Maybe then there is the ability to add some of those things to make it a more practical project. The warm, safe, and dry, I don't think is necessarily the best approach because it does leave some of those things hanging out there. But the question was asked, what would it cost just to do those minimal things? But I think there's that domino effect that you have to think about.
Thank you.
Can I add some clarifying point on that? I guess what Doug's saying is there are, there's mediums in between these three steps. I would still continue to make the point that this building setup right now is not great for programming. We've done a lot to try to get it there, but it's not as good as it could be. I would say that maybe not a full renovation, but at least have some sort of consideration. If you're talking about more of a medium type project, have some sort of consideration for programming in there. Not a full renovation, consideration, but at least have some consideration for program.
What do you mean by programming?
The functions that occur in this building, that we have adequate space, we have optimals, we have a better setup, not maybe optimal, but a better setup for locations of people and you know, where, having the right people where they need to be,
Mr. Vicky?
and the adequate, sorry.
No, good, that's fine, sorry.
So there's no way to wait to see if we get the grant funding to move forward? Like, if we vote on this, then this train has left the track and we can,
You can absolutely wait.
I mean, if we waited until October or whether or not we got this grant, could we then make our decision then based on that?
You could, you're just losing that time in between now and the grant. So what is that?
Yeah,
July, August, September, October,
5 months.
yeah, thank you.
I mean, because, like you were talking about, you mentioned about, you know, setting these guys down a path and then saying, okay, we either got the grant or didn't, so now we're going to pivot. Could you pivot to no?
Yeah. Happens all the time.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, and at what cost does a pivot to no?
Like, if we decide that we're gonna move out of this, we don't get the grant in October and we're gonna completely pivot to Richboro Middle School. Then you pay the architect for the work that's done.
Yeah.
And that's it. Then you cut the contract, because this building is in a historic district, you wanna take kind of historic renovation options with the architect. So you might not want to use that architect at Richboro Middle School. So you could just cut your ties with, because we always have that out in our contracts, you would pay them for the work that's done. And I've done this at another
If they did
district.
work.
Huh?
If they had done any work.
Yeah, if they had, yeah,
Okay.
assuming they had done some work, you pay them for negotiate what they've done up to that point, and then go to another RFP process for Richboro Middle School.
Okay.
I've definitely seen in my auditing career, projects that were started and then discontinued.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not that familiar with it. My concern is if we would say, okay, let's go. Now we've committed to at least $8 million, you know, and who knows what else, depending on what we would decide. So I wanted to know, just make sure that we could pivot to nothing if we so desired, if there was a better option.
Absolutely.
If I could add to that.
Right.
I agree with your concern. I think maybe, you know, with it being June already, you have July and August, you have the summer month in there, maybe your RFP process is gonna be 3 months with the breaks and the holidays. If you go through that process and have a team ready, they might not be ready by the time the board approves them till September anyway, and then they're just ready. And then if you get the grant, then you're having a meeting to talk about programming on day one and not starting that 3-month process then. So, you know, it's a risk. Architects are gonna come in and give you an RFP knowing it may or may not happen, but, you know, that's a risk.
Yeah, Ms. Osicki and then Ms. Stone. Thank
I
you, Deb.
wanted to respond to Mr. Rapp's point, or I guess question about Mr. Rapp's point. So let's say we decide to go forward with like the medium plan, and then we get the grant. Is it too late then to address some of Mr. Rapp's concerns programmatically moving some things around, or no?
I don't think so, because I think if you issue the RFP based upon, it could be a total renovation, the architect knows their fees based upon documenting that major project, and then anything that you do in between can be covered by their
I think that's
services.
where, just full transparent, that's where I'm comfortable then, I think.
Great, thank
Right,
you.
David, I'm not speaking out of.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I think so too. Ms. Ms. Stone, I have a question.
Well, that kind of threw a wrench in, because you're kind of implying that we should do an RFP for the full boat 18.
No,
No.
don't confuse what
Okay.
I'm not making a recommendation in
Okay.
any way. All I'm saying is, if you issue the RFP to an architectural team and you tell them the work could include the total renovation or as little as the warm, safe, and dry scope and anything in between, the fee that they provide you will allow them to do any scope that you're asking for, because you've asked them. If you say, we're just gonna do the warm, safe, and dry in an RFP, and then you come back and say, hey, I think we wanna actually do total renovations, the architect's gonna say, well, my competitive fee proposal didn't include doing all of that. And then now you're negotiating and your competitive fee isn't competitive anymore. So you're better off going with the competitive for the bigger scope, and then you don't have to do it, but you can.
Well, and David, close your ears, because then we're in the disadvantage of negotiations.
Well, you are. I like the idea of 3 line items, so you at least know that you're getting a value per scope, which I think would be easy for everybody to accept.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you mean going forward with all 3?
No, offering in the RFP for the architect to provide a fee for each of the 3 options. And then
Yeah.
at least you know what the cost would be to do those. Yeah.
Thank you for complicating this RFP.
Oh, did I just do that?
So are we then going to make that decision to not lose the time and start with the RFP as soon as we can? Is that what's on the table right now?
I think that
Sounds
makes
like-
sense.
Does anybody
Do we have a
object?
consensus on
I
that?
mean, just for clarity, this is an RFP that's at no cost to us. I mean, other than staff time, sorry. But,
You're paying us no matter what
well,
we're
okay,
doing, so.
all right.
Okay, we can go.
So we don't
Comes
lose
in
time.
October to find out,
can't be
if-
taking
and hopefully we do get.
No, I've said, is there any objection?
A decision can be made back to the board on, okay, which avenue do we go? Where do we go from there? And if and no is an option, we have that covered then.
Administration can perform can do an RFP at any time. That's not something that requires a board decision.
Yeah.
But we don't want to do that without
Knowing the will of the board.
knowing that the board wants us to.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not, I'm just saying, believe me, we don't want to do an RFP if you don't want us to do an RFP.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that that's not something that we need a board action to do, that's all.
I remember hearing that before, yes.
But we can't do a damn thing with that RFP. So.
Okay.
So that, you know, that's what it would say. But, I also want to go back to, when we're talking about, say we don't get the grant. We do have to remember that we will still be in a position where we have a building that is very important to the community, that has problems that need to be addressed for the long-term existence of the building. So I just want to make sure that we're back to square one with that, so.
And we need an administrative building that is at least warm, safe, and dry for our staff to function, so, well put.
Please.
Does anybody else, I think it's pretty clear. Does anybody else wish to comment or questions?
Do we want to do David's idea of all 3 options?
Yes,
Yes? Okay.
we like Davidson.
And I would like, sorry to speak out of turn, I'd like to understand more about like what option 1 really would look at, like in terms of moving walls, or like, you know, how would it change the building programmatically that would make it function for the staff? Because, you know, it's an extra $10 million, so I'd really like to understand that a whole lot better than I do currently.
But that seems like it would be at a later time, that we don't have to
Yeah,
tackle that today.
Fair enough.
that full scope can be reviewed, but that full renovation is taking all the fixtures out, it's taking, it's all the finishes,
That's not my concern. My concern is when Mr. Rapp says this building could function better for our staff. It would have to function a whole lot better in order to
Yeah.
justify coming.
understood, right? And staff and community, right? Because there's community functions and sometimes they're not close enough to where they need to be, or people have to go up 2 floors, and it would be better if it were near the front. So those are the things I think Tony's probably talking about.
Well, that, I don't want to go up and down the stairs 100 times a day.
You need your steps. I mean, we all do.
All right, thank you. Progress, good.
Okay. We're not done yet, though.
No.
Okay, so the next items we're bringing back, and if you guys look at page 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 are all topics that we discussed last month. So again, it's Newtown Elementary School, Maureen Welsh Elementary School, Holland Middle School, the South Stadium, the full scope, and then the reduced scope. So one thing that we briefly spoke about in the prep meeting for this was Holland Middle School. If you guys go back to the schedule that we talked about last month, just a reminder that based on, it says Big Pack 3, the completion of this was in August of 2028. The reason why we have this as a completion in August of 2028 is because if we go the whole way back a few months, more than a few months, to the demographic study, in August/September of 2028, that is when the enrollment jumps, and we do not have capacity for the number of students in that building. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Again, that's for the Holland Middle School additions and renovations. Hand it over.
Thank you. There's a couple ways we could approach discussion of this project. We could just look at these in the order that they're presented. I would ask the administration, Dr. Sanko, what would the administration identify as the highest priority of these projects, beyond Chancellor, these other?
I think before, our highest priority is still Wrightstown. That's the situation that we need to deal with. As far as what we want to do with construction, I would say it would be Newtown Elementary would be number one. Followed very closely by Maureen Welsh.
Okay.
And then a Holland Middle School.
Okay.
Perfect answer from Tony.
Good, great, thank you. Holly.
So if that's the case, why did you say that we're gonna run out of space at the middle school by 2028 unless if we act immediately? That should be the highest priority if we are running out of space based on projections, right? If we don't do this according to this, right? If I read it correctly, we start the design and then there's the construction and it ends at the time that we need the extra space for Holland Middle School. So that must be the number one priority, otherwise where will the kids go? Unless if I don't understand correctly what you.
I mean, that is.
Yeah, I think you understood. I'm not.
I mean, one is a space issue, but we also have building renovation issues where we have two buildings that are behind many of our other buildings, and we need to get them caught up as well. So we have space and programmatic issues as well.
Right, but what would you do if we don't decide, say, soon, when we're to do the space for Holland Middle School? Where would the kids go come in 2028?
So, I mean, I sort of misspoke in that Newtown Elementary was number one, Maureen Welsh was number two, followed closely. And I would say that for different reasons, all three are probably our top priority, but obviously we can't do all three at the same time.
Why not?
One, it may be best to do.
Why can't we just do three things at the same time? We can renovate the elementary school.
Biggest reason would be funding. We have to plan out.
And you have to.
Well, yes, we have to manage, and we need, I need a draw schedule so that we can put together a borrowing schedule. We have to manage that
vacate.
You know, if the time constraint, and so I'm a little bit thrown off on it because I didn't know we had that much of a time constraint on Holland Middle. But if we have a bigger time constraint space, then that would move that more to the front of the line. Now, Holland Middle and Newtown Elementary at the same time. I think the original idea was that it would be Chancellor in one of the elementary schools, and then the other elementary school, is that,
That's what we were talking about last month, so
yeah.
it's kind of
phased in,
staggered start.
staggered.
Yeah, phased in,
Which-
that's good.
Which
good idea.
improves our ability to borrow money because as we have money being put aside in debt service, we have more borrowing that we could do earlier.
Right.
So,
If the board prioritizes some of these projects, then you could just take that and start figuring out the funding and
Yes.
issuing the bonds and what is our capability, how
yes.
we can execute, right? Excellent, thank you.
But, you know, we want to have Holland Middle done by 2028. If I'm looking at this,
To me, that's a priority.
It is finished by August.
yeah, so it is finished by start of school in August, or August of 2028, according to the schedule that we have put together recently.
So I don't mean to speak for Doug, but I'm assuming Doug started with the construction completion and worked his way backwards to see when we needed to start design work. I mean, it's kind of backwards of how we typically do things, but we know we have a pretty finite completion date, so we needed to work our way backwards.
And I think I said Tony's answer was perfect, and it is perfect that they're competing priorities. They're all important to us for obvious reasons. You know, the water infiltration in this building is important. Newtown Elementary is important. Wrightstown, as Tony said, is important. Holland Middle, and I think that that's where, you know, we want to talk and listen to what Doug and David say and hear what the board says in terms of giving you all the information. The only differential I'll offer, and I've offered this before, I'm confident in speaking for our administrative team in that we want to make sure that we're taking care of our buildings, obviously, but where kids are first. And this is the only building at Chancellor that we don't have students in, but it doesn't mean that we don't invest in it, it doesn't mean we don't renovate it, or it doesn't mean, but the challenge is all these competing priorities.
Thank you. Ms. Khan.
Okay, so regarding Ms. Polly's question, I think when I was looking at this spreadsheet or document, it's saying, you know, they started backwards. So Holland Middle School, according to this timeline, would be finished in August before school started, based upon the enrollment and proper study. And then also, we have to remember that Marina and Welch and Newtown Elementary has to go through that construction process with students in it. So the construction is going to be just 2 months by itself, and then the whole year of design. So those are 3-year projects. And then I know Mr. Rapp already brought it up, but, you know, when we started the first meeting of this district master planning study, that, you know, one of the things that I have in the original one of the original documents is, and we've discussed time and time again, is that issue at Wrightstown. I know we have short-term bandages and we kind of address it on a short-term basis. I know every board member sitting on around this table have brought up that concern. I think I just want to bring that forward because of the fact that I don't want it to get lost because it doesn't have a dollar figure attached to it, that it gets lost in the shuffle. And we're talking about priority number 1 being students and, you know, what they're getting on a daily basis for instruction and space. And then moving forward long-term, it's going to take some time. So whether we start that process now, whether it's a survey, whether it's, you know, realignment, whatever it is, when we have this proper study that we know is relevant and we're using it right now for the looking forward in 2028 for Holland Middle, we should still be using that data while it's relevant and discussing what we're going to have as a long-term solution for Wrightstown. And Holland Middle and Wrightstown, all, you know, being relatively new construction, they all started off with, after construction, having enrollment and population issues to begin with.
So let me just comment, we have not forgotten about Wrightstown. at all. We do not have a quick fix for Wrightstown, as we've said before. Internally, although we haven't spoken at this table, we're continually looking at Cropper's numbers. And we had an idea that was brought up at this table some time ago that we're investigating by polling or surveying our families of Wrightstown to see, if, to in some cases, provide school choice. We're not there yet in terms of doing it. We don't know, should that go to the community? Should that go to just people that live within certain boundaries? You've heard terms like spot redistricting. So all those things that we've talked about here, we're still discussing at a cabinet level. We're just not at a point where we want to say to the board or the community that this is what we're going to do to take the next step. So Wrightstown has not been forgotten. I've stood in front of that community a couple of times and told them that they're high on our priority list. The one thing I will say is that unfortunately some students have had to be displaced at Wrightstown because we have capped. And what's piqued our curiosity is when we've gone back to several of the families to say, you can go to Wrightstown, they have asked if they could stay at Richboro. And so that's piqued our curiosity, and we were able to allow that to happen and allow people to stay at Wrightstown. So that's something we're working on with the education directors, with Cropper, and with all of Cabinet.
I guess just moving forward, my almost 2 years time on the board, and knowing that it's not a short-term fix and it's going to take a while, we're gonna have to communicate and have conversations with the community. I mean, I know I've spoken with that community personally, and they know, they just don't know what decision is going to be made. And out of respect for them, not only to include them in the conversation, but also, give them that grace of time so they can plan.
That's absolutely right, and that's why we're not sitting here tonight saying we're going to survey the community. We have to have it well thought out as we bring community members into it and go back in front of Wrightstown and ask for input and suggestions and ultimately, make some decisions and come back to this board and share it.
Thank you, Dr. Stanko. Ms. Stone.
So that would leave Wrightstown outside of the capital improvement program? So we would still continue to look now at what's in front of us in terms of priorities? Yep. Okay. So?
Okay. Maybe a way to move this conversation forward is by looking at that Gantt chart, the spreadsheet that everybody was talking about in terms of the timing and when the board needs to make decisions about moving forward with projects. And if you look at the Gantt chart, the first decision point, they're almost equal. The first two decision points are Newtown Elementary and Chancellor, followed by Holland Middle School, Council Rock South Stadium, and Maureen Welsh. According to this Gantt chart, the decision point for Maureen Welsh is not until January of, it would be January of 27. As in, if we discuss it in terms of this grant, the Gantt chart, and the timing for would you refresh our memory? Is this driven largely by financing and priorities? This takes into account into financing, right?
No, right now this is driven solely on priorities.
Okay.
And the only one that has any kind of outside constraint is the Holland Middle School, and that's the demographic study.
Okay.
The rest of them, we can move and shuffle around.
So this is based on the book that's developed over the years in terms of priorities.
I'm sorry, Tony.
Sorry, it's my fault.
Yeah, Tony.
Well, I was just going to remind the board that we did have two numbers that we got from BFM as far as borrowing. We talked about $76 million that we would be able to borrow now, and that could be as high as $120 million over the next 3 or 4 years, depending on how we do it with draw schedules and draw schedules and a borrowing plan.
120.
What we were doing,
Million over how many years?
120 over the, I think it was 3 or 4 years, depending on where we're not going right from, so right now, we have money that's being put away in the debt service fund to fund, so when we have debt that's gonna fall off, rather than waiting for the year it falls off, we'll be able to fund that debt prior to it falling off, because we had money put away to cover the interest on that debt. So,
Up to, not,
up to.
between 76.
Right, so if we have debt that falls off in 2029, we can borrow that in 2027 because we have funding to pay for the interest on that for 27 and 28. And what we were doing before, I remind the board, is we were usually doing a bond issue every spring for the upcoming year's planned construction expenses. So, and that's what we would put together based on the plan, and the draw schedules would be, you know, how much we need to borrow in year one, how much we need to, and what our limits are at that point as well. So the more that we wait, borrow, the better our borrowing is. And I know it's a tough thing to talk about, but you know, we whether or not we would need to, especially when we start looking at the high school, raise taxes to fund construction. I know that's not a popular thing to talk about, but it is something of a reality when it comes to some of the construction that needs to be done here.
Yeah, I mean, following on that, because that was kind of my question, when I look at this Gantt chart, you know, to me, this is the top 5 projects on a Gantt chart that's got, you know, 15, 20 projects on it. And so I don't want to lose sight of those other projects that are further out and making sure we can afford those, particularly the high school. So that was my question. I want to make sure that that's in the back of your head also, Mr. Rapp, that, you know, we can't use all of our money on these. Yeah. Thank you.
One of my top 5 things keeping me up at night.
Ms. Stone?
So can we then look at this and come to some consensus as to which projects we should actually move forward on? Can we, you know, come to something so that we can follow along with this? It looks like this summer you want to start with, again, with RFPs for design and so on.
Yes.
And
I'm just looking. Yeah,
at least 2 of the projects have to get rolling quickly because we're moving forward on the RFP for Chancellor Center.
okay, well, first on the chart is Newtown Elementary. Do you want to talk about Newtown Elementary? Questions
No, I say
of
let's.
our architect and engineer?
I have just a question. It's not specific for Newtown Elementary, but just as a general question. You know, we know that there is, you know, a time value of money as we push these projects out further and further, and inflation and all that. Is there a way to shorten up any of these design projects, particularly at these schools that are so similar to, you know, other renovations that we've done? Does it have to be a year? I mean, that just seems.
So I'll let David speak to Newtown, because Newtown is a sister to Richboro and Hillcrest, so maybe you want to answer that one.
Yeah, the building design, you can, because you could probably take that down to 6 to 7 months, quite honestly, because you have that work. So it comes down to what you're doing on the site, disturbing on the site. Land development is instantly a year, and often more. So that's where your challenge comes in, whatever you do to the site.
Ms. Bowden?
So I just want to ask Mr. Rapp about the borrowing capacity. You said right now, we can borrow 76 million, right? When you say right now, when do you mean? Because a lot of these projects, right, we don't need to borrow until we actually start construction, correct?
Right.
So, which is not gonna happen until a year from now or later, right? At that time, would our borrowing capacity be higher than
Well, that's-
76?
It wouldn't be, so right, we have debt, a debt instrument that was paid off fully last year. So that money that was going to that debt is staying in our debt service fund. We have the money that we raised taxes on for debt service, that money is going into our debt service fund. Right now, if we needed to go out, we could borrow based on what debt service we have available that's not going to any debt right now, without worrying about any money that's been saved. We could go out and borrow 76 million. When I talk about the 120 million, that's where we're at. That's a rough estimate based on borrowing when we need to, like you suggest. So that's how we end up with the 120 million that we borrow. You know, and depending on the period of time, it could be more or it could be less. But that's the rough estimate of that amount. So 76 right now. We don't have any debt that drops off until 2029. So that's the next time that our overall debt will become available, which.
So so Newtown Elementary is about 47 million, and the Holland Middle School is like 13.7. So that's about, it's less than 76 million. We could initiate planning for both of them, and then probably have enough if we need to do something with Chancellor Center.
Yes.
So, I mean, we could start the process at least with two.
I'm not gonna say for sure, but with the
Right.
timing of these projects, there's a possibility that we could do all 5 of these, based on the amount of money that we could possibly borrow, depending on the timing of the project. Whether or not, I'm not gonna say 100% guaranteed, but there's a possibility.
Without increasing any taxes on that, right now. I'm not talking about high school, because that would be a major. But right now, we would.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. I don't wanna say that it's a definite, until I have a draw schedule and we can put that up against borrowing. And don't forget that, you know, where interest rates are right now, and they might be better in a few years, they might be worse. As far as, you know, all the benefit that we've been getting for our investments, could bite us foot if, on the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Good choice.
So, you know, it's possible. I certainly don't, I know I'm hedging, but, I'm good at that apparently.
Could somebody refresh our memory again briefly about the necessity for the work at Newtown Elementary, why it needs to be done?
It's at the end of its, most of the equipment there, at least on the HVAC, like mechanical, electrical side, it's at the end of its useful life. We do need to do a roof replacement that we took off of the capital plan because we're talking about renovation to the building. You know, I don't think it's as, like Richboro Richboro Elementary, we put in terrazzo. There's terrazzo there, so there's not that factor. But there's a lot of mechanical and electrical that needs to be done, a roof. What else, Doug? What am I
Yeah,
missing?
the infrastructure is like 35 years old-ish.
Yeah.
So all of those systems are getting, you know, very tired. The controls are still pneumatic controls. I think there's a mixture of pneumatic and
Yeah.
digital in that building.
Yep.
You know, they're the old unit ventilators. The roof is definitely, we coated that roof probably 15 years ago. It's well past its life for a new roof. It's a membrane roof that was coated with coating, and the coating's basically deteriorated at this point.
It's still holding.
Yes. So, you know, it has, and then any improvements to site circulation that might want to be considered. I know I worked with Mr. King many years ago, trying to resolve that, but it still seems to be a little challenged. So maybe something more significant can happen there to improve bus and parent traffic, so that there's not that mixing that you get.
And while this says 47 to 48 million, that doesn't say definitively what the final price tag is going to be, because we'll be presented with options by the designer. And, you know, if we move forward with an RFP now for an architect, we're not committing to spending that amount of money. But that's just the estimate that we're working with.
This total project cost estimate, right? That's, you're looking a little, you know, upfront. Initially, there's no cost to get an architect in.
Is that our next step, to consider an RFP for an architect for this project?
Architect and construction manager.
What do people think about going to RFP on this project? Okay, then we're going to move forward to the RFP process for an architect and a construction manager, Newtown Elementary. Thank you. Next is Holland Middle. We talked about the enrollment. Go ahead, Ms. Stone.
No, this timeline should be slightly accelerated and get started on that RFP as well, because obviously you have that deadline that's gonna hit, and you don't wanna get too tight with that if construction takes longer.
Yeah, you probably want to add 3 boxes to the front of each one of those orange if you're going to go through an RFP process for each one, so you can see where that starts to push you for that decision making. And I didn't put those 3 boxes in.
So are we in agreement on,
Those are-
What about an RFP for those 2 projects together?
We could absolutely do that too.
Would that make sense? Would that be an efficient thing to do?
For Holland Middle and for Newtown Elm.
Correct.
Yeah, I think Holland Middle is small enough that combining those with one architect would probably be okay. It's not like 2 giant middle, you know, elementary school projects, so.
What do people think of that?
What do you think of that?
Yes.
Efficiencies. Definitely some efficiencies.
All right. I didn't hear anybody object, so we're going to consider an RFP. We will go forward, ask for an RFP for both Newtown Elementary and Holland Middle School, both architect and construction management firm combined. Thank you. Wow. Yes, Ms. Khan?
Just a quick question occurred to me when we were talking about Newtown Elementary and their roof. I believe at some point there was something about a grant or something that's possibly out there for solar capacities. Is that something at all that would be considered for Newtown Elementary and their roof?
So we definitely could consider it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know the exact details with that grant, but there were some stipulations about, and I don't remember if you had to purchase them or you had to lease the solar panels. I know we've purchased all of our solar panels. We own them, they're ours, we maintain them. But we definitely, and I think the awards were just made within the last few weeks, but it seems like every year that keeps coming back. So that's definitely something we'll keep an eye on, because we put them on.
I can get you information.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, I know Holland Middle was what, And Newtown Middle is LEED certified, right? So I don't know, as we renovate
Well, so
larger
that's a
elementaries.
very good point, you know, do we want to continue with LEED buildings? Because that is gonna be one point that I do need to make in the RFP, if we wanna, for Newtown Middle, or Newtown Elementary School.
Right.
Holland Middle,
Wouldn't apply,
It wouldn't
right?
apply,
But
it's just
then
addition.
Marine too, right? Because they're big enough.
yeah, and that does, especially, well, for both the designer and the construction manager, there are additional costs for applying for those LEED.
Mr. Schroeder.
Yeah, real quickly, that original lead requirement was for the ACE grant, which is currently not around. So the photovoltaic grants that we've been seeing don't have that lead stipulation tied to them for the meantime. That doesn't mean that might not change.
Did we put the solar panels at Rolling Hills?
Yes.
Yeah, Rolling Hills is the only place we have solar panels.
No.
Yeah.
Rolling Hills, Hillcrest, Richboro,
Holland.
Holland Middle. Am I missing one? No.
We didn't do it there.
Okay.
North? Do they? No? Okay. I'm thinking of Central Bucks.
All right.
Yeah, problem.
All right, well, we took care of, for now, Newtown Elementary
Well,
and,
I'm sorry, LEED,
Yeah.
did we want to include LEED, or is that only for grants? Like the ACE grant?
I don't know enough about it.
what does LEED get us if it doesn't get us a
A
grant?
plaque.
What does it,
It gets you plat and some extra spending to get there.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah,
And if it's not a requirement for a grant, then
Thank you.
no.
Yeah, no,
not that I'm not green, and I will say though, that the code to build those buildings today, design those buildings, gets you darn near to that level, but not fully, you can't say that it's, but you don't have to buy some of the extra things that you would need.
Often architects that are used to designing these buildings can often factor in a lot of the stuff, just don't get the accreditation
Right.
that says that this is a LEED accredited building. And I imagine that your firm has multiple either LEED accredited professionals or specifically B&C
Yeah.
that cover this work.
Yeah.
So you just
part of your project?
don't pay extra fees for that administration, but you also don't get the really nice plaque and marketing.
I think we can live with that, but thank you, that's really helpful, Mr. Roosevelt. Hey, you want to talk about the stadium? Ms. Bennett, how do you want to talk about the approach? to the
So we have two options for the stadium. I don't know what page number we're on at this point. It's the last two pages in the packet. So we have the full scope of work, which included ticket booths, restrooms, team rooms, concession, a whole list of items, and then we had the reduced scope. And I think I have them a little bit backwards. The one with the green is the reduced scope. The one with no green is the full scope. So the reduced scope does not include a press box. It does not include the team rooms, the concessions, and food service equipment.
So Jess, I think this is another one where you would bid it with the whole scope and then just do a series of alternates to remove those items, and then you have cost control. You know, so,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I would suggest.
Because this project, and Doug, you were in this position at that point, this project was about 95% designed, and then we reduced it to what we have now. So we could pick up, and I don't remember who did the design work on this?
That was Dewey.
Oh, you guys did design and management, okay.
Yeah. The outbuildings weren't designed per se, we just had a footprint of where they would be. So there's utility rough-ins for water, sewer, power. The location where the buildings would be was allocated, where the bleachers would be and how many, I think it's 1,500, 2,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
That was planned, but there's no drawings per se.
So what we could go two options. We could continue this process with Dewey and have them design and manage it, or we could go out to RFP to get potentially a different designer / construction manager for the project. So we have two options there. After.
Ellie?
So what happened? Why was it designed and then it was not actually built at that time?
At that time, there was just the desire to have synthetic turf at South, but they didn't have the money to pay for the complete stadium project. So put the turf field in so that the athletes had the ability and the band, whomever can get on that turf to use it. And we said, well, let's at least master plan so that if you decide to add the bleachers and do the rest later, you can, without having to tear things up and start over. So those utilities were brought in and capped and, waiting for the rest of it. It's not uncommon for districts to kind of do a two-phased stadium project like that. So, we see that often.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Stone?
I know we've talked about this Maureen Welch is a big dollar amount, right? And we're still waiting, we're still not sure about the grants that we're looking at the Chancellor Center. I'm hesitant to move forward with the stadium, but we talked also about having more games at South on a temporary, the way you did, didn't we have a game there? Can we continue with that, or maybe increase the number of games at home and,
You have to be very cautious about what teams you do that with. So if you have a rivalry game, like a north-south game, you definitely do not have the current capacity to hold that at South.
well, you can obviously control which games are.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just bringing it up that you do have limitations on what teams you can play. If there's a big draw from the away game, you have a capacity issue there with the sheer number of people.
Is it a second?
How much did it cost us to have that homecoming game at South?
I have absolutely no idea. That was the.
So I guess
Andy,
I feel uncomfortable.
for the homecoming game itself.
The break-even point is pretty far in the distance, I guess is my point. It's like, if we're gonna, I agree, like, we should have more games at South when we can, but we're gonna we would have to bring in the temporary bleachers all for many, 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 many years before it's gonna be $7.6 million.
I'm pretty sure all the bleachers were from across the district. They were brought in by the grounds team.
So they were free.
They weren't free.
So
because there
our
was-
break even is like,
There was still cost to it because the grounds had to move it off hours and there was an overtime cost. But I believe all of those bleachers were pulled from different areas in the district.
yeah, I think we should do that.
Mr. Hicks?
Yeah, however, the one thing, that it's also that you're missing here is, like you said, you do this, we've talked about this before, and it's always the possibility of raising funds for these different things. I mean, we've been talking now for 10 years about getting a stadium for these kids at South. It serves a population of 1,800 students a year. It's not just football. There's all other things that you can happen there. You could have your graduation at South outside instead of having it indoors, just for an example. You mentioned the thing you talked about with the color guard and the performing arts. There's a place for them to go. And you can do this piecemeal by putting up the stadium. I mean, the bleachers are nice. I advocated for some of these home games. But there are some constraints with those bleachers. First of all, the bleachers go up probably about as high as this ceiling, so it's rather difficult to see the game. I don't even think they go up that high. I'm sorry, they don't.
They don't.
So it's rather difficult to see the game as you're trying to look over the 90 players on the sidelines, so then you have people mulling around. I mean, this at least serves a whole community that's been waiting for 10 years. And like I said, you could do this piecemeal. You can You know, you wanna have naming rights, you can have naming rights for this field, you can have naming rights for the stadium. You can have naming rights for the concession stand, the field houses. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would wanna to get a part of this, to keep that cost down. And I mean, I still think even the $4 million is rather high, but I mean, the cost of $4 million to service an entire community as opposed to, I'll just throw it out there, to throw out Chancellor Center that services 75 employees and we're gonna spend $20 million. We're talking $4 million that services 1,500 kids every year and an entire community, and they've been waiting 10 years for this. For it not to go through with this, in me, is just, this is long, long overdue. And it does serve kids.
Ms. Stone?
Yeah, I don't think you should be making a comparison with the Chancellor Center and the administration. If without this administration, you can't run 14 schools. So I would not downplay the importance of having a place for it. So just to not make a comparison, it's apples and oranges and it's not fair. But trying to get money towards that project sounds, you know, like a reasonable way to go, where maybe we can then foot the 2 million if we're able to get 2 million. You know what I mean? Not taking it off the table, but
Well, you recommended not proceeding.
not right now, because we still have to figure out the financing for the projects that we're saying we'd like to move forward with. And whether or not how the funding is going to work for those projects, and whether or not we're going to get any grant money. And I wouldn't want to keep the Welsh renovations from moving forward. But I think it's a matter of whether or not there's money available. And if we can get some grant, some community involvement and get some additional funds, maybe that's a way to go.
Ms. Horner?
Yeah, thank you. So could the South go out to RFP and have that started and then look to see where we're at?
Well, they have to do the RFPs, so administration has.
Go ahead, Ms. Horner.
Just to be able to see where we're at, because I mean, I do agree, we could not even be coming into 46 or 76. And if we do start promoting it to say, hey, we're gonna start looking at the South Stadium, we might be able to get some community members that will step forward. But we don't know that until we go and start investigating that.
I think, the stadium's one that maybe, because CHA was involved, they put together the base plan, they have a lot of that information, it might be one you want to talk to them about picking up the ball and at least getting a price from them, because that's something that they have a lot of the legwork on. It might save you some money to continue with that, with them. I think it's just, makes sense. But that's just a suggestion.
Thank you. Ms. Polly?
I mean, we're talking about being fiscally responsible, so just looking at the amount of money we can borrow, everything will add up to whatever, the 76 million. We have to decide what we're going to do with Chancellor Center. And I think that if money was not an obstacle, we would do everything. It would be wonderful to have, the stadium and all these things. And, we have the budget meeting, we have to vote on the budget. I know we don't want to raise taxes, or at least not a lot. So I do though like the idea of getting fundraising from like the community. So if you think that by having an RFP, you can just use that and go to people and see if you have enough support, because, you know, maybe there is a grant, I don't know. I mean, with Chancellor, we're talking about getting maybe $7 million in grants, right? Now, fundraising, it would be very difficult to decide on like spending $7 million for like this when we have all these other projects, but it's not off the table, and, you know, maybe we can raise money. I mean, I don't know, without a financial plan, what we can borrow and when, it will be very difficult to decide, because, when some people are running for re-election, then you're not going to, how can you justify some of this spending? Because you have to have the discussion with the taxpayers, right? And, you know, Holland Middle School, you need a space to put the students in. Otherwise, you know, where are they going to go? So it's easy to justify something like and fundraising from the community, that is an excellent idea, if it can happen.
Ms. Stone?
Has Council Rock ever done any fundraising for specific events like this, or would CREF be able to?
Council Rock, that's how they got the turf in the first place. They did fundraising. It was actually called Turf the Rocks.
And who sponsored? How was that?
I'm not sure exactly how it was done, but it could be looked into. And then what happened, and I'm going to tell you exactly what happened with Turf the Rocks. It had an S on there, and they had asked me 15 years ago to get involved with this, and my question was to them, okay, rocks, so we're going to get a turf at North and a turf at South, correct? And they said, well, we're going to do the turf at North first, and then when we have the money, we're going to do the turf at South. So it turned out to be Turf the Rock. So North got their turf, and then South got a turf 15 years later.
Yeah.
Because it only became one. And once again, like I said, it never happened. It was supposed to happen 15 years ago. South finally got turf 2 years ago. And now, like I said, I think it's only fair that you get a stadium. I mean, I think for Chancellor, you talk about fundraising, I would love to see this Newtown Borough community come up with their fundraising to do something for Chancellor. They're the ones that were in partnership now for the grant. Like, are they willing to step up and do fundraising or whatever's necessary to mitigate the $20 million that we're going to spend? Because in my opinion, if we go with 7, we're going to go 20. Because once they're out of the building, Ms. Osecki made the point that once they're out of the building, we're going to make sure we want to do this right. And right is 20 million, in my opinion, not 7. And I'm going to try to weigh if $20 million is worth it, even with the grant money of coming in with 3. I mean, like I said, if we're basing this on getting a grant, what happens if we don't get the grant? Then we're on the hook. At least with this option here, I'm basing it on $4.7 million and willing to try to either wait or come up with some kind of different funding to get it to the $7.6 million by naming rights or whatever, you know, but can we do this with any of the other projects? But the simple answer to your question is, yes, we've done it before, but it was only done at the northern end of the district.
Yeah, I remember that clearly. That was before I joined the board, but that's why, and at the risk of sounding like I'm patting myself on the back, I'm not. I was just accepting reality. When I became president of the board, there was a lot of ill will about that whole fundraising effort and the fact that the turf field only ended up at North, which is why I argued that we had to put a field at South and was told we don't have the money to put a field at South. And I said, we have to do it. And we found the money to do it. It was an expensive proposition because it's not just the field. We put in fencing, lights, and so forth, and some temporary bleachers. That was a $4 million project?
Roughly, a little less, I think. And we took the surplus soils and created a natural turf field, natural grass field next to it.
Yeah.
A lot of stormwater went into that project, a lot of underground stormwater management.
So that was a pretty substantial investment, and I personally favor waiting on the stadium project, seeing if there's some momentum for fundraising. Particularly when we just decided to go forward with a significant amount of money for educational facilities. And the last thing I want to say is, since we're throwing around figures about Chancellor, 20 million is not the figure that I expect we will spend. My personal opinion is that the mid-range renovation, I agree, makes the most sense. I agree with Ms. Oseki that moving people out of here and doing a very minimal renovation makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't address the programmatic needs that Mr. Rapp talked about. I don't think another good point that Ms. Oseki made was there are features in the full renovation, such as fencing and exterior lighting and so forth, that don't have to be included. So I think the figure that makes sense to think about in terms of Chancellor is the 9.9 million figure. Maybe we throw some add-ons like we talked about and it grows a bit, but I don't see Chancellor I see it being in the range of that 9.9 that's currently the high point for the mid-range. But that's my personal opinion. Mr. Rosen.
Mr. Rapp, what do you need in order to update the borrowing power? You indicated a while ago in this meeting that currently available is 76 from PFM. It could go to 120-ish. It could go higher, it could go lower. The projects that this board is currently viewing on the table are roughly in the totals of 125 to 150 million dollars. So what do you need to update that high-end number to figure out what's available?
Oh, I would need draw schedules for the projects.
Is that something that you and the administration can develop?
You need a schedule in order to develop that.
I don't, that's not, the schedule wouldn't be something that administration would be able, unless I'm mistaken, that we would be able to.
Well, we would need some input on, if we would like to see the draw schedule with the stadium included.
No, I'm talking about whether or not we need to draw a schedule, or we would need.
We're definitely need the help
Yes.
of the, Doug and
Consultants.
Dave.
And so the draw schedule is one part. The RFPs, as we discussed, the administration can move forward with. And it doesn't cost anything beyond, obviously, time of architects sitting here in our meetings, correct? Do those RFPs contribute to the administration's ability to develop a draw schedule?
I think the answer is yes, because I know what my schedule is for these three projects. I think that in my head, and Tony, jump in here, but in my head then, okay, so we've got these three projects, we have a tentative schedule, we kind of need to tighten this up a little bit, move things around just slightly. But I think in order to include what we have left on here, the stadium and Welsh, I think it's schedule, and then we can develop a draw schedule, and then we can get that to Tony, and then Tony does whatever his magic is.
Well, I would have to contact PFM and meet with them and sit down and discuss, show them what, and then give them some time to put together a schedule,
And
a borrowing schedule.
yeah, and as we're aware, projects might get shelved at some point, either after RFP or perhaps even after drawings are completed, as Mr. Taylor alluded to with regard to the South Stadium. So moving forward with RFPs and draw schedules to develop an understanding of how much money we've got isn't a commitment from this board and this district that these projects are going to happen. Some could, some might not, and the timeframes might change, correct?
The only time you're making a commitment is when you're approving a contract.
Correct. Thank you.
And clarifying that, I think you mean commitment for a construction contract, not a design contract.
Well, with design contract, you're making a commitment to work with the architect and pay the architect for their services. That's what I meant, yeah. Yeah, and you're not making a commitment to put a shovel in the ground until you approve
Right.
the contractors
Right. But the way we write our contracts, we always have
and out.
an out.
Right, and then looking at these schedules that we have here, the total soft costs include the fees, the permits, the inspections, and the design estimating contingency, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So that represents, as we can see from here, a fraction or fractions of the total cost for all of these projects. So there's the RFP, there's the draw schedule, then there's the design contract, and then there's the construction contract. So to Mr. Hickey's point about the bus leaving the building, or the train, I think was the analogy that you used, the train leaving the station, moving forward with an RFP or moving forward with a draw schedule doesn't leave the train on the schedule that passes these next stops. It can stop at any one of those stations down the road, or continue, depending upon the will of the board at that time.
I would like, if I could add to that, one issue that may come up there though is asking a contractor or a design firm or a contract manager or a construction manager, and I'm sure you're aware of this, to hold a price. Like generally our RFPs would ask them to hold the price for a year until a contract's signed. If we, with some of this, if we were to go out to RFPs for design or, we might end up asking for a 3-year hold, which I don't think we're gonna get many people giving us numbers for a 3-year hold.
That's correct. And so, I mean, I think as one of 9 here, I would like to see a projection or an understanding, because regardless of what you talk to PFM about borrowing power, based upon whatever, right? I'd like to see what happens after that decision, because I know that this district, or the CIP and the master plan project, has illuminated that there are other projects around the district, most notably high schools. So if this board at one point makes a decision to move forward through these different train stops on that, I think it's important to keep that in the rearview mirror, because if we exhaust our borrowing power over the next 4 years on this and we can't borrow anything for the next 15, we've put ourselves in a hole where we haven't considered all of these projects. So while I understand it's important to move forward in some of this, we also have to keep a mind of these other projects like Wrightstown that we don't have more information to move forward with, but we know at some point we may. And like some of these others, like the high schools. So that's what would be important to me, to understand the impact of these decisions and the ability to make them and understand what number the board has now to look at to figure out which projects to move forward to RFP currently, like this next month, and which ones to move to RFP in 6 months or 12 months, and what the impact of all of that does. That, I think, would be helpful, at least for me as a board member.
Ms. Stone?
Do you think it would just make sense to continue with the RFPs that we've said we want to move forward with? Here we are in June already. And then in a few months, when you get RFPs, we have better numbers, you can look at a schedule and then see what your borrowing power is, and then make that decision in the fall, what other RFPs we want to move forward with. Where do we stand? What can we actually, what else can we do financially? And make that decision again. We have a starting point, and then now we can wait till September, where you may have a little more information, and then we can determine our next steps.
I would put out there in relation to all of that, that our current drop-off as far as available money was about $900,000. So what we paid off last year freed up $900,000 in debt service. In 2029, when I said our next bond would drop off, frees up about $2 million. So,
What does $2 million relating to?
I can't give you that. I can't give that number. There's way too many factors.
Yeah.
In that, but I'm just.
I didn't know if it was an easy calculation.
But keep in mind that the 900,000 that dropped off last year, and what we're talking about, our borrowing power now includes a 1% tax increase that equates to $1.8 million. So it would not be another 75 million just for that.
Ms. Polly?
So based on the borrowing power that you told us, we have enough money right now to support the 3 RFPs that we discussed. And maybe down the road, when we increase, say in 3 to 4 years, we may have an extra 120 million. Then we can do more in Welsh. Did you say that? No, you said that. You said 76 is now, and then you thought that, I wrote.
76 is now, is if we went out and borrowed today.
Yes.
120 is with planning.
Okay, so,
But in 4 years, we get another 2 million that gets free. I can't make an estimate on that.
no, I don't, so what I'm trying to say is, we cannot just go out and RFP everything now, because we don't have the money to spend. We don't have the borrowing power. So it makes sense to RFP what we have borrowing power for, and then plan for the future. For example, if we want to do the high school down the road, it makes sense from your office to come up with a schedule, how would you be able to afford it, right?
Yes.
I mean, even for Maureen Wells, to do an RFP now, if we are not gonna be able to afford it for another like 2 to 3 years, what's the point of getting an RFP that is not gonna be valid because it's gonna change?
I wouldn't recommend doing an RFP now for Welsh, because we don't have design on here until 2027. So we wouldn't do an RFP until the end of 2026.
Right, so it makes sense to RFP whatever we have borrowing power to do, and then, but for the high schools, I think you have to plan out. So you will have to tell us, what do we have to do if we want in how many years to have a high school? And do we need to start increasing taxes to increase our borrowing power? Do we, are there any other ways to do it? Because that's how we plan for the future. We cannot decide now, but we can plan so that we know when the time comes, we make the right decision. And I know you cannot answer this right now, Mr. Rao, but try to please plan for it and let us know.
We are planning for that, trying to keep this in mind and what we need to do. I mean, we did bring forth last year a tax increase to help pay for construction.
Yes.
I think in hindsight, I think that looks like a very good decision, considering what we have on our plate. Not to toot my own horn, but there are other factors that go into that, though. We only have a projection of what the Ackland index is for the next 3 years, I believe, or 2 years. It's usually about 2 or 3 years ahead. So we still got to worry about taking care of the kids now. So I'm saying we will do the best, but it's kind of like what Doug and David explained early on in this process is that we're going to give you an estimate, but reality could be much different. I mean, you know, we have debt that's coming, that's gonna be available for refinancing very soon. It might not make sense, it would save us money to refinance it, it might save us money, it might not make sense to refinance it. I think at some point, we're gonna ask the board for a couple of these debts to say when it saves us a certain amount of money, it'll trigger us going to refinance it. Meaning, so that we're not missing out on an opportunity, so if it's gonna save us, you know, $10 million to refinance something, you give us permission to refinance it at that point. So, there are lots of other factors that matter, that factor in. So, you know, we'll, you know, looking at the cost of, give you some sort of rough estimate, but, and again, you know, what is the board's appetite for a tax increase? Right now, we have a tax increase that, you know, helps us do what we need to do to take care of kids now, but it doesn't, it does still leave us with a decent deficit. So.
Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have comments or questions? Is this Mr. Taylor's last meeting with us for a bit? Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We did this once before with a hard hat and everything, but not this time.
That's right. Have your hard hat.
Actually, Mr. Tate, Doug is volunteering his time tonight.
Oh, yeah?
Thank you.
Oh,
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Switches.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for all your help, Doug. Okay. If no one else has comments or questions, we'll move to public comment.
I'll just point out.
Yeah, Mr. Roosevelt.
Thank you. Just to make it clear, Mr. Rapp mentioned the 1 year hold for the RFP. The only project on this schedule that's beyond 1 year is MMW.
Okay, good. Public comment.
Before we do that, can
Yes, please.
just make sure that we're clear.
Yes.
We're doing an RFP for Chancellor Center on all three. We're doing an RFP on Welch and
no, not well.
Newtown and, I'm sorry, and Holland Middle.
Yes, combined
Are we doing one for the stadium? And we're not doing one
for Welsh. No. So it's two RFPs. Two.
Two.
It's Chancellor and Newtown and Holland together.
So three projects, two RFPs, yes.
And you could do the stadium.
No, I thought they were gonna do this.
Variety of different scope.
Yeah.
It's different it's a different type of material installation and construction.
Well, and Doug pointed out, I'm sorry, Doug pointed out that we are not obligated to go to RFP for a project of that scale. I mean, certainly for a project of 47 million, we do go to RFP. For a project of 14 million, we ought to go to RFP, but $4 million, you know, to go to CHA, who's familiar with the job, you know, that's it.
I'm not promoting myself. I'm no longer.
No, and he's no longer, yes, I should say.
So I just want to be clear.
Full disclosure, yeah.
All right.
Mr.
As the business administrator of the school district, I would recommend that we go out to RFP for all of these projects.
Okay.
Not Welsh,
What?
not Welsh.
No. We go out for any project.
Or any project.
Okay.
Can I just?
And that's not any disrespect to you guys down here.
This schedule has the design portion for the stadium beginning in March of '26. So,
These are not, okay, I'm gonna set expectations here. I can't get all three of these, if we go for
That's my
RFP, I
point.
can't get all three of these done in July.
well, that's what I guess that's my point. Is like, why
Yes.
don't we go for RFP for the stadium, you know, in September or something? Yeah,
That's exactly what I would be doing,
yeah. So we'll do that.
I'm not matching.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, as Tony indicated, if its project's not gonna start out 6 months to a year, and if you do an RFP now, the numbers are not going to,
They're gonna be all over the
Valid.
place and inflated, because you don't know what the economy
yeah,
looks like
so
at
you
that
have to,
point.
you can't do
But yes,
a
if,
project that's
If we go
thought
to
out.
RFP for the stadium in the fall, we stay on the schedule, is my
if we
point.
go for RFP, and
Yeah.
if you guys say to me tonight, we're gonna go to RFP for the stadium, I'm going to prioritize Chancellor, and then Newtown Holland, and then the stadium, along with all the other summer projects that we do. So
Yeah,
if you guys authorize direct us to go forward with an RFP for the stadium, it probably won't go out until August, September.
Okay,
Okay.
So stadium too?
no. I don't know that there's a consensus. We can ask. We haven't decided.
if she's not gonna do it anyway until September, then why do we talk about it now? We talk about it in August.
No, because she said, let's vote on it now, and it'll get done in September.
Right.
So I wanna go around the room.
That's
Yeah.
fine. That's exactly my point, Bob. That's all. I agree. We'll go around the room.
I'll start, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the RFP for the South Stadium is within the 1 year. It doesn't make sense to go out now. It makes sense to go out to RFP later on in the fall perhaps. But I'm in favor of doing an RFP for the South Stadium. And I expect, as Bob properly articulated, there's community members in the South that have been looking a long time for that.
I'm fine going to RFP for it.
Sure.
Yeah, especially if you can use it to get some fundraising. I mean, you can say, you know,
Yep.
here's the plan, let's do it, right?
I would,
Wait, you just skipped me? As long as it doesn't, for you, Ms. Binda, that it doesn't create havoc and you're saying it's gonna go on the back burner and you'll deal with it late summer, early fall, when you would have time for it anyways, and dealing with all the other priorities, and it doesn't cost us anything, then yes. Thank you.
I would agree, except I'm not into spending $7 million on a stadium, so I wouldn't even want to RFP at that high end.
So what we would do is we would RFP, like Doug was suggesting, we would RFP the entire project. And then during construction, we would bid the entire project and then do alternate deducts to remove those items to get us back down to the lower. So then at that point, then the board as a whole would decide, do we do the full project or do we do the reduced scope? Or is there something in the middle that we want to see?
Yes, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. There we go. All right. Have we concluded our business? Ready for public comment? Okay. Yeah, 3 minutes, please. Thank you. And introduce yourself and
I will.
where you reside.
All right. My name's Gary Brandt. I run the Northampton Men's Softball League. Okay? With us tonight is Mike Barrett, Tom Hanlon, and Stan Stevenson. They're all representative of the clubs that play. We have 8 teams that we play in it. Let me give you a little history of this. The league started in 1971. And it was actually run by the builders of Northampton. Okay, they wanted to get the people in the community to give some camaraderie and get out and they play. We play it Friday nights, okay, and have been since that. I've been associated with it. These guys live in the township. I'm from Southampton, okay. I umpired. This is my 50th year umpiring in this league, okay? Started in 1976. 25 years ago, there was no one to run it. So I stepped up start run the league, just so it wouldn't fold. So we're down to 8 teams. We were up at one time 16 teams. Okay. Approximately 150 residents there, and you have to be a homeowner to play in our league. Okay, and we have it's men, and I'm proud to say we have a woman now in the league. So it's men and women, but they have to be homeowners. Okay, and tax-paying people, and that's which they all are in Newtown and in Northampton. Okay, we play on field-wise. Okay, we have Council Rock North upper field. That's the JV field, girls softball, and we now have the because the season's over, we have the lower field that we're allowed to use now because the fence is down, and we take that down because we have to have an adult field, which girls their fence is 205 feet, okay, which is not acceptable for us because they hit it further than that. We used to have south, but the varsity field used to be 250, which was acceptable, but you guys shortened it, which is fine, and took the fence in, and they have it for the varsity girls. We can't play there. We used to have the JV field, and we were thrown off of that field because the AAU team, Council Rock Gold, wouldn't let us play on there on Friday night because they have a fence, and they wouldn't let us take down the fence. And that field is not being used on Friday night.
That's 3.5 minutes. I'll let you keep going, but.
Well, we've been, sir, with all due respect, I've been here since 6 o'clock.
I know, we have two, so.
I understand. All right, real quick. I mean, this is a concern of ours and also the people. Why we're here. I get a bill from Angela DeMeo, great lady. Get a bill of $1,200. I'm saying, what is this? We've never, ever had to pay for the field. Never, in the 56 years we've been operating. I get this bill. I'm saying, holy moly. Now this is like April, end of April, and we get this bill. And we don't know what it's for, and I talk to Ann. Ann says, well, it's $40 a field for every game we play. So what I'm asking, okay, I know eventually we have to pay the field, it, okay? I'm asking if you guys can waiver this year, because we're not budgeted for this year. We take our teams, okay? I get softballs, umpire fees, Northampton fees, insurance, which we had to get insurance now, okay? We've never had to get insurance before. So you guys are in on the insurance policy, Council Rock school districts. And we divided by 8 teams. And it came out to $150 some, So, I'm only asking for you guys if we can get this year waived for us so that next year we can budget for it and we'll know what we have to budget for.
Thank you.
All right?
We'll consider your comments, absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, guys. Thank you. When will we know?
I don't know. We won't delay unnecessarily. We'll get back to you.
The finance department.
Yeah. Okay, next, Cheryl, please.
Cheryl Kearns Hills, lifelong resident of Newtown Borough. Again, I thank this board, I thank the administration. I also now need to thank the borough for stepping forward also. Again, this process continues here with this district master plan. I definitely thank you The board is seeking a more defined options. Continue to do it right. I learn new things every meeting. Go with those RFPs. My connection tonight is every year, the National Trust for Historic Preservation celebrates Preservation Month in May. My heart says it should be year-round. Continue onward with your goals as preservation creates. The National Trust states that preservation strengthens communities, breathes new life into neighborhoods, supports a healthier planet, and builds a more just and connected society. This year's theme is harnessing the power of place. Power affects something or someone. And the power of each place can be big or small. As a board, you will not be remembered individually, as I'm not going to be remembered for public commenting your ears off. But by the ways you as a board used your power to preserve district history. You can harness the power of place, as you will be remembered for what you built, not what you bought, not what you got, but what you gave the CR community. Make the decision to go for that needed money to fix Chancellor. You will never regret it. Leave a legacy. Let's preserve Chancellor. And as an aside, coming off, I got a lot to say, but preservation impacted our students yesterday in our district. It was a blast from the past. We had over 200 students from Good Elementary, all the 5th grade, and all of Newtown State. And really a shout out to this 5th grade staff. Can't thank you enough, number one, for still teaching. Number two, they helped us bring this walk back. It's better than ever. And again, it just highlighted the teachers now have a viable connection. There were too many add-ons in the past. It correlates to the curriculum because their daily mission is how do you balance everything, get it in. As an aside, there was a militia boot camp going on yesterday. And it turned out many fine minute women and men. And so I want you to know that you're going to sneak yourself because of their efforts. So again, it makes an impact. Board members, this is the last one. Mark that on your calendar for next June. You are interested in seeing what's going on. Newtown Historic every Sunday now through October from 1 to 3. The board in and we'd love to have you. Love to have you also out there for the Historic History.
Good.
So, it was a good time for us. So thank you again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for moving. Appreciate it.
Terry Conley from Newtown Borough. I really do, I'm very impressed with all the time and effort that all of you have committed to this decision. I love the idea of putting the RFP out with 3 options. I've written grants in the past, I've written federal grants, they can get turned down. The good thing about the 3 options is depending on the money that this grant comes through with, it will help you because you'll have the 3 options. There's no question in my mind, I love the middle option that has selective repairing of plastering and floor. I'm not saying we're gonna do a whole redo. So I will agree with Mr. Tate towards the middle option. It seems to me financially a better option. But again, I want to thank everyone. I also want to say I participated in the walk. It's an amazing experience. I volunteer at Newtown Borough Library. There's tons of history at that library. We have original documents that were published by Benjamin Franklin in 1707 that these students get to see when they tour the library. And the library is part of that tour. But again, I just really want to thank you for putting all the time and effort in as volunteers. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to say
Very good. Anybody else? Anything else for the good? All right. I guess we're adjourned. Thank you.